having me. Mr. Steen asked me that I come and give you an update primarily on the I-55 project that we have going on here between Madison and Gluckstadt with the new interchange. We expect to have all of the pre-construction phase of that project completed by the end of this calendar year. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able, provided that the construction dollars was there for funding it, to build it, would be able to start advertising that project this November, maybe in January, and have it underway. This past session, as you know, going back to 2022, I guess it was the first session that I was there as director, and working with the legislative leadership with regard to our capacity construction program, which is the program designed to build out the system, turn 2 lanes into 4 lanes or 3 into 6, build bypasses and stuff like that. The conversation was had with the legislature that if they were going to give us one-time money, that it was the most sensible thing to do was to put the one-time money on these one-time expenses and be able to get the big construction projects out of the way. So they started that in 2022, and up until the session before this past one, we've received roughly about $1 billion from the legislature that's helped put these big projects around the state that were being brought to fruition under construction. The next 2 that we have on our list is this I-55 project and a Highway 25 project over in Rankin County. As I said, the I-55 project should be ready to go this November to January. Highway 25 be somewhere in the same neighborhood. Unfortunately, this last session, we fell, and I want to be clear, that MDOT came out of the session very well. They gave us a good, clean budget. As you know, we're a special fund agency. They didn't encumber any of our dollars. They gave us the flexibility to move the money around to be able to play the shell game that we have to play to maximize the federal money that's available to us. They allowed us to continue moving salaries to try to stop the bleeding of employees and build back a team that would allow us to do the work internally at a savings of the taxpayer. There was a component that even adjusted the fuel tax, which should generate more money for state aid roads around the state, as well as for the Department of Transportation over the next 3 years. That'll be phased in, which will help us go a long way in maintaining the system that we've got. Where we had the breakdown this time was we fell prey to the disagreement between the House and the Senate with regard to a project bill. I don't want to get into their politics. I'll let them speak to that more than anything. But during the regular session, we had legislation together that had funding for these projects included. And so we thought that we were sitting good with that. At the end of the session, when the disagreement happened over what a special project would be, I think the House wanted to do what they've done in previous sessions, which had a lot of member projects that helped localities around the state. I think the Senate felt like instead of spending that money, they wanted to spend it on the state project, which would have been MDOT, IHL, other state facilities like that. And at the end of the day, no agreement could be reached, so no legislation of that kind was drafted. I feel confident that this coming session we're going to have a lot of interest in trying to do that, primarily because the projects will be ready to go by then. And I feel good about our opportunities to work with the leadership to get the funding for the 2 next projects that we have. Outside of I-55, just pulling quick numbers, and I do want to say Commissioner Willie Simmons does a very good job representing the Central District, which Madison County is a part of. It's a pleasure to be able to work with him, and I can tell you that he has you have his ear and that he's interested in trying to help you accomplish all the objectives that you have here as a county. But over the last 2 years, in maintenance alone, MDOT has invested about $15 million into the Madison County. We have another $20 million that's currently under contract throughout Madison County and work. And as of next year, we have another $35 million in new programmed projects that would be smaller in nature compared to the interstate project, but that will be around the county. So I do think that the folks of Madison County are going to see a lot of orange barrels around, which means progress. Unfortunately, the best that we can hope for as a Department of Transportation is be a inconvenience to people, because everything that we do is right in the middle of where people are trying to drive and work and live. I know Mr. Steen asked me to mention the 4 bridges on Highway 51. We do have some funds that were made available specifically for bridge repairs around the state. And so we've got a lot of bridge projects going on, and these 4 bridges qualified for that funding. We have 2 that are closed now. The other 2 remain open, but there's 2 others that we plan to work on at one point. We're working with landowners now that before those 2 would ever be closed down, we want to have the work on the 2 that are currently closed completed, and we want to have an agreement worked out where the people that are impacted right there, the landowners, have access to their property during the time of the construction. So that's in the process of being worked out, and as soon as we complete all of those conversations and have something concrete to give you, I'll be sure that we report that back to y'all so you can know what we're doing with that. But that in a nutshell is it. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or if I failed to cover something that you were wanting to know.
Brad, one thing that hopefully you're prepared to answer is Highway 51 from Canton to the city of Madison, as far as MDOT doing some work on that road as well.
As far as, I know we've got some program projects. I don't know the details of them. I'd have to get that and provide it. But I know that that's part of the $35 million that we're talking about that'll be invested next year around the county.
Yeah, sound like they doing some, digging out and
I saw
getting
firsthand
ready.
this morning, all the digging out. One of the reasons I was slightly tardy, was MDOT workers providing services to Madison County citizens, by fixing some issues with.
The last 2 years, we have awarded more contracts than in agency history. The last 2 years, we've topped $1.2 billion in new construction around the state. And with that's gonna come a level of growing pains, I guess, if you will. So around Mississippi, you're gonna have a lot of those situations that may be a little bit of an inconvenience, but hopefully we're gonna have contracts drafted in a way that gives contractors incentives to try to finish ahead of time, that would penalize any that fall behind without justifiable reasons. So I'm real pleased that the partners that we have to work with in the private sector to deliver the product to the taxpayers, they're taking it very seriously as well and trying to do that in a way that is as convenient as possible.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah, Brad, I just want to thank you and MDOT for all the work that you all do all around Madison County. But my concern is the bridges north 51. Is there any way that you all can work some way or other to be able to speed that up? Because you got people shut down that basically don't know another way around. The local folks, they are angry because they got to take a back road. You get the people that coming from homes on back, they run by the intersection of 17, saying, hey, I know they ain't got the whole road down. And then when they get on the way road, they see that the whole road is shut. So you got 2 of them under construction now. When you move to the next, 3, 4, 5, whatever, is there any way you could do all of them at once if they close together? Or build a alternate route, where a car can go around and keep going? And I know you talk about more money, but these are questions that my constituents are bringing to me that I have nothing to do with.
Well,
so I'm asking the man that has something to do with it.
Well, ideally, it would be nice if the funds were available that every time we have to do a bridge repair, a bridge replacement that requires for a bridge to be closed down, if we had the ability to build some type of a alternate bridge there. We just had that situation over Pearl River on the Simpson-Copiah County line where a piece of logging equipment came through and did some severe damage to that river bridge, and the whole bridge had to be shut down for a few months for repair. It just wasn't financially feasible in some of those situations to come in and try to build an alternative bridge or a temporary bridge. One, by the time we would get it done, you'd have the work completed on the one that was out. And 2, the money is just simply not there. Now, what we are doing that you spoke about is we are trying to work something different with our contracts where we try to incentivize the contractor to finish early. he has a financial incentive to try to speed the project along, try to do things in a way that is not causing any unnecessary delays in the project. We're trying to work into contracts things that would allow for if there are some avoidable delays that are the fault of the contractor, that they be penalized financially for that. So we're trying to do our best in delivering contracts in a way that would make the people doing the work want to do it as quickly as possible, as safely and efficiently as possible, and be able to do that. Now, in regard to those bridges, as I mentioned before, we are working closely with the landowners around to make sure that to the best that we can, they don't lose access in that area. That's the reason that we've not moved forward on the other two bridges that I was mentioning, is because we're still having those conversations now, and we want to do as least interruption to the people and cause as least amount of problem as we can, particularly to those that have to access the land by virtue of their property and things like that. At the end of the day, just trying to manage expectations, there is absolutely no way for us to do our work without causing some type of interruption. We are going to try to do things when we work on the interstate, for example. If something has to be closed down, we try to do that as much as we can at night or when there's not peak traffic. But having those types of delays and inconveniences to the public, unfortunately, is part of it. And another reason for that is we went so long as a state without the appropriate funds to where all we were doing was trying to catch up on maintenance work. That now that funding has been made available, we've started trying to, you've got a whole list of projects that have to be done, and particularly where bridges are concerned, those are not the type of projects that you can wait on. I mean, you've got to go ahead and fix them before they get to a point that you're putting the traveling public in danger. And so that's another reason why you see so much of that right now, is we have a lot of bridges that we're closing and working on because the funding's been made available to it. They're in need of the repairs, and it's the responsible thing to do. But during that time that they're under construction, there's going to be some, inconveniences. But that's a long way around the barn, and me telling you, it is equally important to us to try to show the people that we're doing the best we can with what we've got. We're trying to deliver the product in a way that causes as least interruption as possible. But I would remind them that there's just no real ideal way to do that type of work.
Ms. White, it's kind of like the Board of Supervisors work. It seems like every road we work on is a major thoroughfare road, and it's going to be some inconveniences. But once it's finished, hey, it's real good. It works very well.
Yeah.
And also, I want to personally thank you for, and you mentioned a little bit about the interstate money, this past section that did not happen. I know we worked together very, very hard to try to make that happen this session, along with the business leaders in Madison County.
That's right.
And it was almost a daily thing, weekly thing, that there was some meetings and telephone calls to try to get the legislature to put some money there, but it just didn't, it just didn't happen.
Right, and I want to be clear that I don't want anybody to read that as a lack of support of the project on the part of the legislative leadership or its members. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the project weren't ready to be built. Had they given us the money this session, the money would be sitting in the bank as of July 1 until it was time to let the project at the end of the year or the first part of next year. They know that they've got another bite at the apple without delaying the project. And so it really didn't concern me. I mean, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, but it didn't bother me that we finished the session the way we did, because they did us right with a clean budget. They did us right with more recurring revenue. We're more equipped to deliver the product that we're tasked with delivering to the taxpayer than we were this time last year. And come January, every conversation I've had, from the speaker to the lieutenant governor and everyone else, these projects are going to be a priority in identifying funding to build, just like the projects we've had in the past. And I would remind you that this same thing happened with the I-55 project in DeSoto County. The same thing happened with Highway 7 project in Fayette County, that you know, they did some partial funding for those, but we didn't get the complete funding for it until it was the year that the
Right.
project would come to fruition and we'd be able to let. So I don't want anybody to misinterpret the conversation about not receiving the money as the legislature didn't support the projects. That's just not the case. It was just there were no monies made available for any special project
Right.
around the state, whether you were MDOT or whether you were Joe Blow County or city. And I think next session that we'll have a much different conversation.
Yeah, you know, again, you know, there's work continuing with the state leaders as of today, and it is still their number one project.
Yes, sir, it
They
is.
have mentioned that to me personally, but along with some business leaders as well, that it is still their number one project. And we definitely appreciate that, and hopefully come January, in this section, they will fund, you know, the widening of the interstate, which is approximately 150 million.
Around 150 million was the last estimate I saw.
Right, so, other statements for Mr. White?
I just gotta say, Brad, I do not envy your position. I think you're doing an amazing job,
Thank you.
with heading up MDOT for our state and county. We definitely are blessed to, have you up there and doing good for, the thing that's closest to me, which is Madison County. I just wanted to clarify, the very first thing you opened it was that, the pre-construction was gonna be done by end of year. When you say pre-construction, does that mean shovel-ready? So that
It's bringing
gonna
it to
be
shovel,
funded
it's
as soon
bringing
as
it to the
gets
point
funded?
that you could start the construction of it. So
Okay.
it's like the moving of utilities, the purchasing of the right-of-way, any surveys that had to be done, the design of the road, all the things that are done that people don't get to see, that has to take place in order then to award a contract to build it.
All right.
And
that is
so
amazing.
we anticipate all of that to be done by this November, December.
Yeah.
And we would be then in a position that should funding be made available, that we could move forward with awarding a contract to build it.
Good, good. I was falsely under the impression that y'all couldn't start on the project till it got funded. So this is amazing news for me. And,
Well, we
uh,
can't start building it until it's
Well,
that funding
but
there.
shovel-ready
but,
is,
yeah, the commission already had assigned money for all the pre-construction phases.
yeah, I
So
guess.
all that we've been seeking from the legislature is the lump sum to build it. All the money to get us to construction, Commissioner Simmons and the other commissioners had already assigned, and we're moving forward.
Amazing. That's the best news I've heard all day, and I hope it is funded and we get those things going in soon. So, thank
Me
you.
too.
Brad, give us a little Cliff Note version of what you mean by pre-construction and the dollar amount that's being spent before a shovel hits the ground, like environmentals and survey.
Like what the process is?
Yeah,
or
what you've
something?
already done.
Well, anytime you have one of these big capacity projects, we have federal requirements that we have to meet. So you go in and you start with surveying the property. You determine what right-of-way has to be purchased in order to build out the project. You determine what utilities have to be moved, you know, from the rights-of-way in order to build the project. You have the design of the project that's put underway that basically develops the plans and shows what's being built. Some of these processes and some projects could take up to 8 years to get through all the pre-construction phase. In comparison to the construction of the project, it's not a lot of money. It is a lot of money because you're probably looking at $10, $15 million, something like that, and I can get you the exact amount that we've spent on the pre-construction of it. So in comparison to the construction dollars, it's a very relatively small amount that gets us there, but it's a time-consuming deal. And then Federal Highway requires us to be able to deliver ultimately, and this is what we'll have at the end of the year, a certificate that shows the right-of-way is clear, utility's been moved, the property's been bought, the design's complete, all of this is done. And if we could show them at that point that we could either cash flow the project or fund it outright, then they would give us the green light to go on and build it. But that's basically the pre-construction stuff, is all the behind-the-scenes details that goes in to getting it to a point that you can hire a contractor to go out and start implementing the plans and building the actual project.
Okay.
And Brad, I know Supervisor Brandon mentioned it just a second ago, with his understanding, you know, there's so much, I'm gonna use the word false information or misunderstanding in people's minds why it doesn't happen today. And you just mentioned that it can be 4 to 8 years, and the county's in the same way. You know, even with Bozeman, we have to go through the same process that you just, mentioned.
Well, and I
Immediately.
want to remind you that for about 10 to 12 years, the commission had put projects like this under a moratorium because we didn't have the funds to run the capacity program and the maintenance. What we're graded on by the Federal Highway Administration is the maintenance of our system. And so if we start falling behind in that, then you put at risk all the federal money, which is more than 54% of our budget. So there was about a little better than a decade that the commission basically said, we're gonna have to cancel the capacity project unless we receive federal grants or things that allow us to advance individual projects. And we're gonna put all that money over here into the maintenance fund to help rehabilitate and maintain the existing investment the taxpayers have. Well, when Federal Highway was last reauthorized, Senator Wicker happened to be one of the senior Republicans on the committee that did the authorization, and he was able to get an extra $1 billion in that 5-year authorization, which gave us about $200 million extra a year. And so the commission at that time said, now we can restart the capacity program. Well, the problem we ran into then, that had the program not been interrupted, we wouldn't have had, is then you had to go back and take all these plans that we were talking about that was done during the pre-construction phase before of a lot of projects, and then update them. You had things that had changed drastically over the last 10 years, including the standards by which we had to build the projects. So having the funds come back at a time about 4 years ago that we could restart everything, I think it's remarkable that the team has been able to get as many projects to the table as they have.
Yeah. Brad, appreciate the update. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank all of you.
Appreciate what y'all are doing in